Now we've talked about how marketers exist to create value between what the company wants to create and what customers want so that you are really meeting those two things congruently. In order to do that, in order for marketers to know either what to produce or what the customer wants, it needs to do research. So there's actually a group of people in the field of marketing that all they do is research. All they do is research, understanding the marketplace, understanding the customer, and trying to see what better products and solutions should be out there in the marketplace. For a long time, when I worked in what we call the industry, which means when I was not a full-time teaching professor, I was in the field, I was in the industry, and I was senior vice president of digital strategy and analytics for a major advertising agency with 9, 10 locations across the US. I did a lot of traveling, had a whole big team and everything. And inside the agency, we offered a lot of services. I'm just going to show you a screenshot of some of the services that were offered. And you can see here, so I oversaw the digital marketing team. I oversaw some of the media planners, the ones that bought digital. I oversaw the data and analytics team. I also oversaw the social media team. Let me just scroll up a little bit so you can see. I also oversaw the social media team, right? But look at this. I just want to show you all the other services. I know I just moved the screen a little bit, but you saw there were a bunch of services. This was a marketing and advertising and public relations agency. And you can see all the services that were offered within the agency. They're all types of marketing that businesses need. So many types of marketing. Somebody could come and say, we just really need experiential design. Can you guys do that? Or, we need search engine optimization, which by the way is like my little love, my passion, SEO. It's how companies rank higher and higher inside Google. That's my thing. Anyway, they could come and say something specific that they want, right? But at the end of the day, we had a lot of people that would come with their specific need, but they wouldn't be able to articulate why they felt like they really needed this service for their market. So it was up to us to say, let's do some research and help you understand if your customers want this product or service, how they will react to it. Even sometimes we would look at outside, we would do competitive research and understand what it is that people are doing, that your competitors are doing that is really hitting the mark and what is missing the mark. So a whole department of people that only did research. All right. So this chapter is all about understanding why marketers need marketing research, how we define marketing research and why it's important, and then describing how and why marketing research is done. All right. So I want you to make sure that you pay attention to what is within what we're going to talk about here, because there are many different types of research. Oftentimes people think of research and we just think of surveys, but that is not the case. There are different types of research. There are actually 3 different types of research, and surveys just happens to be one subset of one of these types of research. So anyway, exploratory research. That is the whole idea of asking open-ended questions to try to understand things qualitatively. That's one type of research. Descriptive research is when you try to quantify the feelings, attitudes, and opinions that people might have. You ever been given a survey, for example, being asked, can you rate on a scale of 1 to 10 whether you would recommend this service, this product, this professor, whatever it is, right? So that's when you're trying to take somebody's feeling and trying to quantify it so that you can say 9 out of 10 people find this service to be highly recommendable, right? So those are examples of descriptive when you're really looking at quantitative definitions of how people feel and react to a certain product or service. And then there's causal research. Causal research is when you're really trying to figure out through experiments the relationships between variables. So for example, trying to understand if so and so happened, if we were to increase the price, what might that do to your purchase behavior, right? If we were to decrease the price, what might that do to your purchase behavior? Really trying to maybe even put experiments in the marketplace where you might dial up a certain feature, certain quality, a certain variable to really try to see how that might affect people's buying behaviors and reactions. So causal research is the third type of research. Now, most companies, when they're doing marketing research, will involve exploratory. Most will also involve descriptive, but few will also add on causal research. It's typically added on to one of the first two. All right. Let's take a minute and just dive into the exploratory research again. So exploratory research, remember, this is that qualitative one where you're trying to ask open-ended questions. And you can do that through surveys, but you can do it a bunch of other ways. There are many different formats to try to get this information out of people. Focus groups being one of them that you may or may not have been involved in. Pop-up surveys on a website. Even intercepts where you meet somebody in a mall or you meet people in person and try to ask them questions. Lots of different ways to actually produce or actually collect the information from research. But in terms of where companies go to get this research, there are really a few main ways to try to get that information out of people. You can do it with secondary data. This is when you go and you just buy the information because somebody's already done the research. There are a bunch of research companies out there. Nielsen, I'm forgetting the other name, but there are research companies out there that kind of specialize in this kind of thing, and you can just go and say, hey, I want to buy, for example, the social media networks. That's one of the ones I was forgetting. You can go to Twitter and say, I just want to buy a list of people that fit a certain demographic that are likely to use Twitter. Or I want to buy information from you, Twitter, on how often people use your platform during certain times a day. And Twitter will sell you some of that information without, of course, giving away people's information, personal information, that is. So as a business, if I wanted to really go after Twitter audiences, I could just go to Twitter, buy that secondary information. I didn't have to go and ask my audience how often they use Twitter. That would be known as primary data. Primary is when you go and collect brand new data for your audience because you're collecting it as a first time person. You're primary data collector versus a secondary data collector. Okay, so those are the two main types of ways that marketers collect exploratory information for research. Now, if companies do market research well, they are able to learn two things. The first one is they're able to learn customer behavior. Companies that do a really good job and have a strong research team are able to gain insights into why customers do what they do. Why do I sell more of this product in the winter? Why do I see dips in traffic during these times of the year? Why is it that when we increased our prices, less people bought when we thought that they wouldn't, when we thought that they would actually buy more, or whatever the case is? You really understand the why behind the behavior of your people when you do research, instead of guessing or because the CEO said they think this is why the reason is that you go that route. No, you ask the people. So doing research allows you to gain insights into customer behavior. And the second thing that doing research allows you to do is to understand how likely people are to recommend you to a friend or colleague. In other words, if people are having a positive experience and they're sharing the word out there, hopefully, not only are you learning their behavior, like I just talked about, but you're also learning the potential for you to gain more customers in the long run. So that's where this idea of the Net Promoter Score, the NPS, comes in. This is when companies ask questions like, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend or colleague? Ever been asked that question? Ever been asked it even by a professor even? All right, even if it's not in the real world as you're selling a product or service, maybe you've been asked it in a survey while you're at school. It's highly beneficial for businesses to understand the likelihood for somebody to promote the brand, because that helps you to understand your viability over time. It's a huge asset to know that kind of information. And your Net Promoter Score is the metric. Your likelihood to be recommended is a scale that goes up to 10. So 10 being the highest. And so the higher your Net Promoter Score, the more likely you are to be recommended by people that have purchased from you before. The NPS score is a huge metric for businesses to keep track of year over year. All that said, another important thing to remember is that when companies are using surveys to define their market research, or to design their market research, sometimes they make mistakes. And your textbook does a really good job of listing some of those mistakes, and I want you to make sure you take a look at that. too many answer choices, too few answer choices, sometimes making things too open-ended that you end up not being able to structure the responses that you get. Lots of even things like leading questions, right? Kind of leading people to make a decision. Would you say that you would be more likely to, just say, are you more likely, or what is your likelihood to, as opposed to kind of pushing people to say, would you agree that XYZ? Because then somebody would be like, yes. And maybe they would have said no if you had phrased it differently. All right. So let's wrap up by saying that market research is a huge and important part of businesses, and especially of the marketing function. It's more than just surveys. Although surveys are helpful, there are other methods to actually gathering this information and pulling it out of people. Secondary research is amazing if you have it, but if you don't have it, go the primary route and try to get that information firsthand. Sometimes you have secondary information and you still get the primary information because there are gaps. And also, you own the primary information. It's about your customers. You collected it. No competitor has that information, only you. So if you have the primary information, it really is an advantage because it's really specific to your audience base. You focus grouped your audience, you surveyed your audience, you did your own research, and you understand them better than anybody could. So there are benefits to doing secondary research. It's cheaper, but primary is definitely more expensive, but certainly usually more relevant and more directly related to your audience. Most businesses use both. And keep in mind that your research questions, and keep in mind your research question. What is the big question that you're trying to ask overall? You don't just start surveying people without having a main objective that you want to get out of it. For example, we want to have a better idea of how to price our product, or we want to have a better idea of the next flavor to roll out, right? There's a general question that you're trying to answer, and the research, all those questions are aimed at helping you answer that one key question. All right. So market research, huge part of marketing. People do just that for a career. And that, I hope, was helpful and meaningful, and that you got some new learnings out of it.